Picture a 12-year-old boy, shivering in the biting London chill, as the person he looks up to most leans in to deliver a command that would leave a permanent scar on his soul. Don't let them see you cry. Just keep walking. Those were the words Prince Charles reportedly whispered to a devastated Prince Harry, mere seconds before they began that agonizing march behind Princess Diana's casket. To the 2 billion spectators watching from every corner of the globe, it appeared to be a monarchy united in sorrow. But beneath the heavy black veils and the echoing hymns of Westminster Abbey, a cold, calculated game of strategy was unfolding. Today, we're peeling back the gold leaf and royal tradition to expose 15 unsettling truths the House of Windsor fought to bury alongside the people's princess. We're diving into the mystery of a 500-pound lead-lined vault, a coffin so heavy it required 8 men to lift. Welded shut for a reason they never dared to disclose. We'll uncover the human shield, maneuver a cold-blooded political tactic by the British government that used 2 grieving sons as a buffer to prevent a public revolt, and perhaps the most poignant secret of all, why the world's most famous icon was laid to eternal rest in a borrowed garment, clutching a sacred gift from a saint that protocol said she shouldn't have. From the fierce tug-of-war over the royal standard flag to the enigma of what truly lies on that secluded island at Althorp, this wasn't just a funeral. It was a tactical battlefield. These are the 15 secrets of Diana's final farewell, the royals never wanted the world to see. Before we unlock the very first secret that nearly broke the men tasked with carrying it, show your support for the channel by hitting that like button. It helps us continue to expose the stories history tried to hide. And I'm truly curious, from which corner of the globe are you joining us today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's incredible to see how far the people's princess's legacy still reaches. Secret number 1. The quarter-ton burden. We begin with a burden so immense it nearly shattered the elite soldiers chosen to bear it. When the cameras panned to the Welsh guards, the world saw their muscles straining, and their faces etched with what many assumed was the sheer emotional weight of the tragedy. But beneath the vibrant folds of the royal standard lay a literal, crushing secret. This was no ordinary casket. It was a 550-pound fortress of wood and lead, staggering at over 1/4 of a ton. But why such a colossal weight? This wasn't merely a nod to royal tradition, it was a grim, biological ultimatum. For a body to be interred in an above-ground vault, rather than committed to the earth, it must be hermetically sealed. The lead lining acts as a suffocating barrier, a desperate attempt to defy nature by trapping decomposition gases and barring every drop of moisture. But the lead wasn't just for preservation, it was for permanence. The moment that lid was soldered shut, the people's princess was effectively encased in a metal time capsule, destined to be hidden from human eyes until the end of time. 8 of the crown's strongest guardsmen were hand-picked for this task. They spent days in grueling, repetitive training, practicing every step to ensure they wouldn't buckle under the combined weight of the cold metal and the icon resting within it. Yet, while these guards were preparing for a test of physical strength, a far more volatile battle was erupting behind the gilded, closed doors of Balmoral and Buckingham Palace. The weight of the coffin was nothing compared to the political storm that was about to break. Secret number 2. The War of Protocol. While the world mourned, a cold-blooded war of status was being waged in the shadows. You see, the funeral, we all remember the grand televised spectacle, was almost cancelled before it even began. The problem? A single, missing title. Following her explosive divorce from Charles, Diana had been stripped of her Royal Highness prefix. To the faceless traditionalists within the palace walls, the infamous men in grey suits, Diana was no longer a royal. She was a private citizen, and according to their centuries-old rulebook, a private citizen deserved nothing more than a private, quiet farewell. But the palace had severely miscalculated the pulse of the people. As the public's grief began to mutate into a towering wave of fury, the tension reached a breaking point. On one side stood the Queen and her gatekeepers, clinging desperately to protocol. On the other, Mohammed Al-Fayed, the grieving father of Dodi Al-Fayed, was reportedly incensed, demanding the royal send-off Diana deserved. Then, in a rare and startling act of defiance against his own mother, Prince Charles realized the terrifying truth: if they treated the most loved woman in the world like an outsider, it wouldn't just be a scandal, it would be a revolution. A frantic, desperate compromise followed. Because there was no blueprint for burying an ex-royal who was more influential than the reigning ones, they had to invent a new kind of ritual, a unique funeral for a unique person. Every detail, from the path of the procession to the guest list, became a bitter tug-of-war. The monarchy was effectively fighting for its life, trying to navigate a battlefield where tradition was being crushed by the sheer weight of public demand. They weren't just planning a funeral anymore, they were trying to prevent the collapse of the crown itself. Secret number 3. The Flag War. As the world looked toward Buckingham Palace, they didn't see a symbol of mourning. They saw a bare, wooden flagpole, a cold, silent middle finger to a nation in tears. This ignited what historians now call the Flag War. For centuries, royal protocol was ironclad. The royal standard only flies when the monarch is in residence, and it never flies at half-mast. The crown's logic was chillingly simple. The monarchy is a continuous line, the king is dead. Long live the king. To them, the flag stayed up, or it stayed down. There was no middle ground for grief, but to a public drowning in sorrow, that empty pole was proof of the palace's perceived heartlessness. Headlines screamed in a fury, "Where is our queen? Where is her flag?" Behind the scenes, the queen remained dug in, a prisoner of her own rules. But Prime Minister Tony Blair saw the data the royals chose to ignore. The British public was turning Republican overnight. Secret reports warned of potential riots, of a crown about to be shattered by its own stubbornness. Finally, in an unprecedented act of total surrender, the Queen broke 900 years of tradition. For the first time in history, the Union Jack was raised, then lowered to half-mast for a non-monarch. It was the exact moment the House of Windsor realized they no longer dictated the terms of their own existence. The people did. Secret number 4. The icon in a borrowed dress. But while the war of symbols raged outside, a far more heartbreaking irony was unfolding inside the cold, lead-lined fortress of the Coffin. Princess Diana was a global titan of style, a woman who had the world's most elite couture houses at her fingertips. Yet, in her final hour, the people's princess was laid to rest in a borrowed dress. In the chaotic, blood-stained aftermath of the Paris crash, the palace realized they were utterly unprepared. Diana's iconic wardrobe was locked away at Kensington Palace, or had already been auctioned for charity. Her butler, Paul Burrell, had to scramble through what was left to find anything suitable for a final goodbye. Ultimately, she was dressed in a long-sleeved, black wool cocktail dress by Catherine Walker. It was a piece she had ordered just weeks before her death. A dress meant for a new life she was only beginning to live. She hadn't even had the chance to wear it, let alone pay for it. The dress that should have been a symbol of her liberation became her shroud, a fashion legend, whose every outfit was documented by 1,000 cameras, was sent into eternity in a garment that didn't even truly belong to her. It was the final, stinging reminder of a life cut short. Just as she was finally finding her own voice. Secret number 5. The Saint's Final Gift. In the haunting stillness of the Chapel Royal, as Diana lay in state, her hands were delicately folded over her chest. Within her grasp was a final, sacred bond, a set of rosary beads. These weren't just ordinary beads of faith. They were a personal gift from Mother Teresa, a woman with whom Diana shared a profound, almost spiritual connection over their work for the forgotten and the marginalized. In a twist of fate that felt like a cosmic tragedy, Mother Teresa herself would pass away just 5 days after Diana. The image is staggering, the world's most glamorous icon, resting for eternity with the gift of a saint. These beads became a silent bridge between the princess and the nun, two of the world's most powerful symbols of compassion, united in death as they were in life. It was a detail the palace traditionalists could never control, a symbol of a heart that belonged to the suffering, not the crown. Secret number 6. The last thing her eyes would have seen, but tucked even deeper into the folds of that black wool dress, lay secret number 6, perhaps the only item in that entire lead-lined fortress that truly mattered to the woman inside. It was a small, crumpled photograph of her sons, William and Harry. It's reported that this was a photo Diana carried with her everywhere, a piece of her heart that she kept close during her most turbulent years. In the cold, clinical world of royal protocol, Diana was often treated as a PR problem or a rogue element. But in that casket, the narrative was stripped away. Secret number 7. The forced march. As the coffin began its slow journey toward Westminster Abbey, the world saw what looked like a family united in a final, agonizing tribute. But behind that image of solidarity was a reality of pure, unadulterated brutality. This was not a walk of unity. It was a forced march. At the heart of this storm was Earl Spencer, Diana's younger brother. He was a man possessed by a single, desperate mission to protect his sister's memory from the very institution he believed had destroyed her. But as the clock ticked down to the procession, an explosive row broke out behind palace walls. The men in gray suits, the palace courtiers, were unyielding. They insisted that Prince William and Prince Harry, just 15 and 12 years old, must walk behind their mother's casket. They called it royal duty. Spencer called it cruel. He was horrified at the prospect of parading 2 grieving children before 2 billion people, forcing them to perform their heartbreak for the world's entertainment. But even Spencer didn't realize that the boys weren't just being asked to mourn, they were being used as pawns in a much darker game. Secret number 8. The human shield strategy. Enter secret number 8, a cold, clinical maneuver known as the human shield strategy. Internal documents and later testimonies reveal a terrifying fear within the British government. Prime Minister Tony Blair's office knew the public was boiling with rage. They feared that if the royal family walked alone, the crowd, infuriated by the Queen's perceived coldness, might actually boo, hurl insults, or even attack the royal cars. They needed a buffer. They needed a shield. The calculation was as heartless as it was effective. No one would throw a stone, and no one would shout an insult. If 2 grieving sons were in the line of fire, William and Harry were positioned as emotional human shields to save the monarchy's crumbling image. The deadlock was finally broken not by compassion, but by a chilling manipulation of loyalty. Prince Philip reportedly turned to a hesitant William and asked, "If I walk, will you walk with me?" It was a question that left no room for a no. The princes later described that 3-mile walk as one of the hardest things they ever had to do, a march of shame and sorrow, executed not for their mother, but to protect the very crown that had cast her out. There were no titles, no scandals, and no cameras. There was only a mother. If her eyes could have opened one last time, that photograph is the last thing they would have seen. It was a final, desperate act of love by those who knew her best, ensuring that even in the suffocating darkness of a quarter-ton coffin, she was not alone. She was with her boys. Secret number 9. The liturgical hand grenade. The atmosphere inside Westminster Abbey was already thick, with a heavy, suffocating grief. But as Earl Spencer stepped up to the pulpit, the air didn't just turn cold, it turned to ice. What followed wasn't just a tribute, it was a liturgical hand grenade. With the entire royal family sitting just feet away, forced into a captive silence. Spencer launched a scathing, unprecedented attack. He didn't mince words. He spoke of his sister as the most hunted person of the modern age, a direct jab at the media and the institution that had failed to protect her. But then came the strike that shook the Abbey to its foundations, a pointed vow that her blood family, the Spencers, would protect William and Harry, ensuring their souls weren't simply immersed by duty and tradition. In the 1,000-year history of British royal funerals, no one had ever used a eulogy to settle a score so publicly. It was a declaration of war masked as a farewell. And then, the unthinkable happened. As Spencer finished, a low rumble began outside the Abbey gates. It was the sound of the people. A wave of applause started on the streets and surged through the great west door, echoing under the vaulted ceilings. It was a sound that shattered centuries of royal protocol. In that moment, the Abbey wasn't a house of God, it was a courtroom. And the public had just delivered their verdict. They were siding with the rebel. Not the crown. Secret number 10. The palace counterstrike. While the echoes of that applause still hung in the air, secret number 10 was already being whispered through the palace corridors. The royals weren't just offended, they were terrified. Behind the stoic, unmoving faces of the Windsor family, a war room was being assembled. They realized that Diana's funeral had evolved into something far more dangerous than a memorial. It had become a rally for the Spencers. The people's princess was being officially reclaimed by her own blood, leaving the Windsors looking like the cold, distant villains in their own story. The tension was so thick it felt physical. While the cameras focused on the hymns, the palace was already planning its counterstrike. They were obsessed with damage control, desperate to find a way to pivot the narrative before the monarchy was permanently cast as the antagonist of the decade. The rift between the two families had become a canyon. Many insiders feared that after that day, the Windsors and the Spencers would never speak again. The funeral was supposed to be the end of the conflict, but as the procession moved toward the final destination, it was clear that the battle for Diana's soul was only just beginning. Secret number 11. The silent middle finger. While the funeral procession wound through the grieving streets of London, all eyes turned toward one specific spot, the roof of Buckingham Palace. What the world saw there was a bare, wooden flagpole standing against a gray sky. To the millions of people drowning in flowers and tears, that empty pole wasn't just an absence of a flag, it was a cold, silent middle finger to the woman they loved. This ignited what historians now call the Flag War. For centuries, royal protocol had been ironclad. The royal standard flies only when the monarch is in residence, and it never flies at half-mast. The logic of the crown was chillingly absolute. The monarchy is a continuous, unbroken line. The king is dead. Long live the king. To the palace. The flag was a symbol of an office that never dies, and it had no room for the messy reality of human grief. But as the silence from the palace grew louder, that ancient logic began to look like a betrayal. The public didn't see tradition, they saw a family turning their backs on the people's princess one last time. Secret number 12. The day the crown broke, behind the gilded gates, the queen remained dug in, a prisoner of her own rules. But secret number 12 reveals the moment the very foundation of the House of Windsor began to crack. The media was no longer just reporting, they were screaming. Headlines like, "Where is our queen? Where is her flag?" were lighting a fire under a nation already boiling with resentment. Inside the government, Prime Minister Tony Blair was looking at polling data that was nothing short of terrifying. The British public was turning against the monarchy in real time. This wasn't just a PR crisis anymore, it was the scent of revolution. Under the threat of potential riots and the total collapse of public support, the Queen was forced into a total, humiliating surrender of protocol. For the first time in 9 centuries, the Union Jack was hoisted above Buckingham Palace, and then slowly lowered to half-mast for a non-monarch. It was a historic defeat. In that single, staggering moment, the House of Windsor realized a terrifying new truth. They no longer dictated the terms of their own existence. The people did. The flag didn't just drop for Diana, it dropped for the old world of rigid, unyielding royal authority. Secret number 13. The calculated vulnerability. The surrender of the flag was only the beginning. Secret number 13 was a masterpiece of image manipulation. As the Queen prepared to address a grieving nation on live television, every single frame was meticulously engineered by image consultants. Their mission: to humanize a statue. If you look closely at the footage, you'll see the Queen isn't tucked away in a private, insulated study. Instead, she stands before an open window, with the restless, mourning crowds visible just over her shoulder. This was a deliberate pattern interrupt. The palace needed to shatter the image of the cold, distant monarch and replace it with the image of a grieving grandmother. They needed the world to feel the wind from the street blowing into the palace. It was a strategic performance of vulnerability, a desperate attempt to bridge the widening canyon between the silent palace stone and the people's raw, bleeding pain. Secret number 14. The scent of decay. While the global broadcast focused on the soaring hymns and the presence of icons like Elton John, those standing on the streets of London were being haunted by a far more visceral secret. Secret number 14 was the smell. Witnesses described an almost intoxicating, sickly sweet scent that hung over the city for miles, the smell of millions upon millions of decaying lilies and roses. As the flowers piled up in mountains against the palace gates, they began to rot under their own weight. It was a suffocating, cloying cloud that choked the air, a physical manifestation of a nation's grief that the royals simply didn't know how to process. It was the smell of a tragedy that refused to be ignored. But as the cameras prepared to dim and the celebrities began to leave, a far more macabre operation was being finalized. The world thought the farewell was ending. But the most deceptive act of the day, a high-speed journey and a secret decoy plan, was only just beginning. Secret number 15. The deception of Althorp. As the funeral cortege left the chaos of London behind, it headed north toward Althorp Park, the ancestral home of the Spencer family. The world was told a fairy tale ending that Princess Diana was laid to rest on a picturesque island at the center of a lake known as the Oval. It's a hauntingly beautiful image, a white memorial urn, weeping willows, and 36 trees marking each year of her life. But is she actually there? Or is the island just a beautiful elaborate decoy? Secret number 15 takes us into the dead of night, away from the prying eyes of the world. Shortly after the funeral, chilling reports began to emerge from the local village of Great Brington. Locals whispered of heavy machinery and strange, military-like activity at the Spencer family vault in St. Mary's Church during the nights surrounding the funeral. The vault is the final home of centuries of Spencers, and it was Diana's original wish to be buried there, while her brother, Earl Spencer, publicly claimed the vault was full. Witnesses reported something far more suspicious. The church's floor was allegedly ripped up and resealed under the cover of darkness. Some believe that while millions were weeping over the island monument, Diana's 500-pound lead-lined coffin was actually being lowered into the stone-cold safety of the family crypt. The deception was a masterstroke of privacy. By creating a public shrine on the island, the Spencers gave the world a place to grieve, while keeping Diana's physical remains in the absolute sanctity and security of the family vault. To this day, the paperwork for her burial remains shrouded in bureaucratic haste. Lacking the standard stamps for such a high-profile interment, it leads us to one terrifying realization. The funeral wasn't just a goodbye. It was a disappearance. From the moment she entered that hearse, the Diana the world owned was replaced by a version that both the Windsors and the Spencers wanted to lock away forever. In the silence of that final evening, as the sun set over the Spencer estate, the monarchy was forced to face the ghost of what they had lost. The 15 secrets we've uncovered today point to a singular, messy truth. The funeral was the last time the old world of rigid protocol tried to suppress the raw reality of human emotion. And they lost. Whether Diana rests on that lonely island or beneath the stone floor of a village church, her true resting place isn't in the ground. It's in the collective memory of a world that refused to let her be forgotten. The royals wanted order, the people wanted a soul, and in that clash, the people's princess became a legend that still haunts the halls of Buckingham Palace today. But now, the question remains, do you believe Diana is truly on that island? Or is the secret deeper than the Spencer family admits? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this deep dive changed the way you look at that historic day, hit the like button and subscribe. We're uncovering the stories the history books are too afraid to print. Thank you for watching. And remember, the truth is often heavier than a quarter ton of lead,